Yo, what is up? My name is AwesomeGuy4000. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to click on my video and watch this. So I'm going to be talking about why Fortnite has not felt the same since Chapter 3, and there are actually a lot of contributing factors as to why. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels this way about Chapter 3 and forwards. Fortnite really has taken a big shift in the way they handle the game Chapter 4 and onwards, taking things into consideration like art style, graphics, movement, like chapter length, live events, storyline. All of that can attribute to why Fortnite has not felt the same since Chapter 3, because those are things that have changed vastly since Chapter 3. Just to specify though, before we get into this, I'm not saying that like modern Fortnite is worse because of all this stuff changing. I'm just making the distinction of why it feels different, why it hasn't felt the same since Chapter 3. Not worse, not better, just not the same. Before we get into all that though, I just want to tell you guys that I am on a mission to get to 1,000 subscribers before Season 5 of OG drops. I'm only 160 something away. I have exactly 2 weeks to get there, so it's going to be close, but if everyone watching this subscribes, I believe that we can do it. So please, if you want to help me get to my goal, subscribe. Now let's get into it. First off, let's talk about art style. Chapter 3 was the last chapter to have Fortnite's signature cartoonish style. Now Chapter 4 does have a little bit of that, but it's like way less to the extent that any other chapter did before. The thing that Chapter 2 did with Chapter 1's art style is it just kind of made it more detailed, right? It didn't really change too vastly the cartoonish factor of it. When it came to the props, when it came to the nature, like the trees and the grass and everything, the art style between Chapter 2 and 3 wouldn't really change that much between those chapters. But what did change is the detail in the props. While the nature art style stayed the same for Chapter 3 and Chapter 2, the prop art style didn't. What I mean by that is that like all the houses, all the props, and all the buildings looked way more realistic and more like how it would exist if it was in real life. For example, like when the Tilted Towers POI came back, it was the same, but there were a few tweaks obviously making it look a little bit more realistic. But notably after Chapter 3 and into Chapter 4, the Unreal Engine did update, giving us things like shaders and just making the max graphics of Fortnite go up an insane level just from that one update from the Unreal Engine. And also I think one of the biggest things too is that obviously Donald Mustard did retire the storyline in Chapter 3 Season 3, so from Chapter 3 Season 4 onward, it was Charlie Wen doing the storyline. But as we know, before Season 4 of Chapter 3, the storyline did conclude. That was kind of the whole point of Chapter 3 Season 3, is that season was a celebration of like the war finally being won over the Seven and the IO. So that main storyline that's been building up for years, it finally ended. And obviously, that's going to be very hard to recreate. Not saying the Charlie Wen storyline is bad, because right now it's actually looking really good, and I will have a video about that eventually. But that main storyline that Fortnite was known for is gone. It ended. Jones is still there, right? But his character has evolved into something just completely different. He's nothing like he was. The Seven died, basically. Sloan is somewhere, maybe going to come back next season. But the way the storyline was conducted and explained throughout Chapter 4 and 5 and onward is way different than how it did in Chapters 3, 2, and 1. 3, 2, and 1 used more of like environmental storytelling and these big events that would have like massive story beats. Nowadays with the storyline, all the massive story beats kind of happen off screen, and the events are more of like just a wow spectacle than like being there for massive parts of the story, you know? Most of it is obtained by like talking to NPCs or doing the quest. Again, not that that's a bad thing, it's just different to how it was done in Chapter 3. But also, you know, a lack of live events could be a big reason too. Chapter 3 did have one event, and that was the mech event, the mech returning and doing all that, finally ending the storyline. And we all know how the end event for Chapter 3 went. I wouldn't really say that was an event, and that might have left a bitter taste after that, you know, leading into Chapter 4. Maybe that's why it feels different, because Chapter 3 just didn't get the justice it needed, right, ending that way. And on top of that, we also didn't know at the start of Chapter 3 that it would only be 4 seasons. We were ready to be locked into this map for 2 years, maybe even longer. Also, you know, the zero build scene has grown exponentially since Chapter 3 when it was introduced. The movement animations obviously have been changed. The movement just in general has been changed. And yes, sliding, mantling, and sprinting were introduced in Chapter 3, but at least that felt like unique to Chapter 3 that all of that got added, right? Whereas we got into Chapter 4, it just felt like a new beginning, because this stuff wasn't being added in this chapter that was already established. It's just there now like it's a new normal. And yeah, not that any of that changing is a bad thing. I do think we need more live events though. But yeah, it's nothing really honestly too complicated. It's just kind of like a mix of like the art style changing, the game just really just evolving. You know, just Fortnite going out of their way to try like more unique stuff that doesn't really feel OG. That's not trying to give you that OG feel. It's trying to do something great and new. And that is the one good thing about every chapter that came after Chapter 3. They're all very distinct, very different, unlike how Chapter 2 and 3 kind of like felt the same a little bit, you know what I mean? It's like Chapters 2 and 3 were both a chapter in one, you know, because they were kind of connected. They're made up of the same maps of the chapter 1 map after the black hole event, if you know, you know. And you know, with the return of the OG mode coming back, they tried to recreate that feeling. It's just not there anymore. It's not something that you can just bring back. Stuff has already changed too vastly for the OG feeling, even of chapter 3, to feel like it exists in any way, shape, or form. And that's just the reality. But you know, fingers crossed, hopefully someday we can get that chapter 3 OG. That was just such a great map, such great seasons going on throughout that chapter. And yeah, that'll be all. Please subscribe and peace out.